Welcome back to a brand new episode of Cutter Simpsons Unhinged. We went through 25, uh, sorry, yeah, we've went through 25 episodes, and I will give you a quick recap. Of course, the playlist will be down in the description below of everything I did. So I talked about Lisa going gaga, a terrible episode. I went through that 90s plot line with Homer, plot hole with Homer and Marge about Bart's conception. Homer having to deal with losing Bongo, his beloved dog, and not trusting dogs or Abe's. Homer at the bat when that episode when Simpsons were on Thursday nights actually beat the Cosby Show first round syndication. The Olympic episode when we went to Vancouver, Maud Steph. We talked about that episode and how it transformed people. We talked about the 15th season Christmas episode in which Homer tries to be a nice guy and Ned is jealous as fuck. Principal and the Pauper, the episode, that was controversial and made them jump the shark. We talked about that. We talked about Homer and a poo. That episode when Homer inadvertently gets a poo fired, and I talked about poo and all that. Lisa the vegetarian was the 10th one in which Lisa turns vegetarian, and it may have been a cash grab to get Paul McCartney. Love is a mini strangled thing when we talked about why the Simpsons keep pushing the narrative that Bart deserves to be strangled. Todd would have forsaken me. That's the episode in which Todd questions his faith of God because of Maud's death, and Ned sends him to live with the Simpsons. Lisa getting an F1 car when Lisa starts driving, and Homer has a parental breakdown. And then we talked about the gay marriage episode from season 16, in which Springfield legalizes gay marriage. Homer gets rid of his anti-gay views just to be a minister for money, and they paraded the Stanley Cup around. The Diary Queen, yeah, we talked about Diary Queen when we talked about Edna's diary inspiring Bart to do better, and then Lisa freaking ruins the momentum, and then the Simpsons Family Guy crossover in 2014 and how it may have led to the Simpsons getting a second wind. Bart the Mother, we talked about that episode in which Bart has feelings after shooting a bird dead that wants to help eggs and has a conflict with March. The Italian double dip and how a B plot about Italy led to the A plot, and The Simpsons going to Italy. We talked about Homer's enemy, that famous episode that saw Frank Grimes basically struggle through life despite his intelligence, and that Homer's sloth life experiences get him all the perks. And then the 20th episode was Kill Bill season 18 when we talked about that episode and how Marge couldn't say no to Gil and Gil takes advantage of her, and how Marge may have an existential crisis. And then we talked about the Simpsons movie from season. Well, we talked about the Simpsons movie and how decent it was and all that, and preparing for number two. The Hail Mary episode that aired after the Super Bowl in 2005. We talked about how people freaked out about religion being in the Simpsons Super Bowl halftime show. Of course, that didn't happen in real life. We talked about the FIFA episode in which the corruption was there, and Homer becomes a referee at the World Cup, no penalty. And the last episode, we talked about the Mr. Burns, Who Shot Mr. Burns saga, and basically gave you the 5 W's. But now we're going to be talking about a season 2 episode. Season 2 was decent and all that. However, I went with something that will make you happy. The old saying, you never forget your first. Well, let's not forget the first ever Treehouse of Horror episode. I'll review that, and I'll talk about some great Treehouse of Horror anthology spots I liked. Jerkhouse Homer, Marge's worries, Bart's pranks, Lisa's causes, Maggie not talking a lot, Grandpa being senile, Patty and Selma boring Marge, Arnie Sif is a jerk, Chief Wiggum making things happen, Mr. Burns being a dick. You can never stop the Simpsons. Heaven knows they've been trying for years and they still come back for more. 37 seasons is a bit much, don't you think? It's a crazy Simpsons. Something happens. A do 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 do. This is not a clip show. Have no fear. I've got topics for years. All right, so this is the season 2 episode Trees of Horror that started the anthology series. It started on October 25th, 1990. There actually was a disclaimer saying it may be too scary for children and all that, and are not treated as canon and all that. So, anyway, it was amazing and all that. That Simpsons would do that. So, Bart, Lisa, and Maggie go in the treehouse and try to tell scary stories, but Bart's not scared enough at Lisa's stories. So he decides to tell Lisa a story called Bad Dream House. The Simpsons managed to move into a 18th century house that Homer somehow got a good deal on. However, Lisa senses evil and Marge wants to move out. Homer says, "Don't be ridiculous. We're going to stay in this thing." All that. There's even a portal to another dimension. Anyway, Marge wants to leave, but then they decide to sleep on it. So while sleeping on it, the ghostly voice tells Bart, Lisa, and Homer, and to a lesser extent Maggie, to kill each other and all that. Marge actually has a knife too, but she's using it to butter a sandwich and all that, and demands to know what's going on. And they all apologize to each other. And then once Marge finally decides to urge, "We're getting out of here," the demonic voice basically yells at them, and Marge decides to yell it back, saying that, "What are you doing this for? What have we done to you?" After the haunting thing and all that, tells the house that you're gonna be living with us and all that. You have to deal with us, please. And then the house decides to blow itself up, and Lisa says that you can't help but feel disappointed that the house decided to blow up instead of living with us. So then the next episode, Bart tells an episode called "Hungry Are the Damned," and the Simpsons are just in the backyard barbecuing when Kane and Cordos and their spaceship abducts the Simpsons. Actually, Homer is hard to abduct because of his weight, so they had to use 2 tractor beams. They give paradises to the Simpsons and all that. Lisa still has her hunches something fishing is happening and all that. The aliens decide to um, give them a feast at Rigel 4, and then they give Simpsons enormous amounts of food and all that. And one alien tells Homer, "Your wife is quite the dish." Of Homer doesn't realize what it means. Lisa then sneaks away and finds a cookbook called How to Cook Humans. However, King says that there's some space dust on it. It says How to Cook for Humans. Lisa says, "Wait a minute, more dust." Ah, How to Cook 40 Humans. However, King says there's more space dust and says How to Cook for 40 Humans. The aliens are upset that Lisa thought that they were going to eat them and all that. They were feeding them, but it was just for goodness. And then Sirac, the preparer, is mad saying, "I slaved over in heaven for you." So they basically returned the Simpsons to Earth and basically said, "You were going to be given paradise on our planet, but we can't trust you." Lisa then says there were monsters on that ship, and truly we were them. However, the family rebuked Lisa, saying that you ruined our chances for immortality. And then Lisa decides to read a book called "The Raven" by Edgar Allan Poe, and all that. So anyway, The Raven, they talk about it with Homer being the poem's narrator and Bart being the Raven and Marge being Lenore. So James Earl Jones narrated it. And of course, the Raven mocks Homer's grief over lost Lenore, tapping on my chamber door, and then says, "Nevermore." Bart even says one time, "Eat my shorts." So the narrator chases the raven across the study, and basically the raven drops stuff on the narrator, like books, like Edgar Allan Poe books, and he wins and all that. So anyway, Bart doesn't feel like it's scary enough, but Lisa says this was in the 1800s, so this was really scary by the standards, and basically said that they're tame by today's standards. And Bart says, yeah, like Friday the 13th. The first one seems to be gory, and then by today's standards, it's tame. So they all leave the treehouse happy and content. Unfortunately, Homer can't sleep because he's terrified of the stories and all that. So this was, of course, a massive one because Treehouse of Horror was in 3 segments and all that. And this was the first, this and only time that the Treehouse of Horror anthology happened in a freaking treehouse. And every year there've been a Simpsons Treehouse of Horror episode around Halloween and all that. So anyway, the first episode, actually, the Bad Dream House was inspired by kind of Poltergeist. The second segment about the cookbook and the aliens was the Twilight Zone episode To Serve Man, and the third segment was, of course, The Raven from 1845. So anyway, they had some nice things. The first few Trios of Horrors had Marge or even Homer talking about how scary the stories are and all that. And then the Tombstone gags were fine and all that. And then they were abandoned and all that. And then Kane Cordos added, Kodos started their life in Simpsons and all that. So anyway, it actually had a Nielsen rating of 15.7, equivalent to 14.6 million households viewing this episode. It was the highest rated show on Fox that week, beating Married with Children. It's had some marvelous episodes and all that. So that was that. Personally, I think it was okay. I mean, I remember after a going trick or treating near my grandmother's house that the Simpsons were there, and basically grandma not wanting me to watch The Simpsons because my mom was not happy with The Simpsons, saying that it was too violent, and it's like Simpsons is too violent. Yeah, right. But yeah, I remember something like that. But yeah, Trails of Horror. The first one, of course, is tamed by standards. Simpsons are going balls out 35 years later. All that. So anyhow, we did that, and now I'm going to talk about my favorite anthology pieces from this thing. So I will be giving you a quick summary, quick, about things. The second Trace of Horror had the monkey's paw, the Bart Stone, and If I Only Had a Brain. The monkey's paw was a story in which Homer got a monkey paw from Morocco, not Monaco as he was hoping for, and grants wishes, and each wish had a bad story. I liked that one. The best from number 2 is the monkey's paw, is because Maggie wishes for a pacifier. Bart wants the Simpsons to be rich and famous, and basically everyone resents them. Lisa wishes for world peace, but gets King and Cordos to enslave the world. Homer, his wish was for a certain turkey sandwich, but it failed. Throws the monkey paw out the window, and Ned catches it and saves everyone's butt. Treasure Horror 3 in 92 was Clown Without Pity, King Homer, and Dial Said for Zombies. I kind of liked Clown Without Pity because I think for sure that, you know, Bart's crusty doll trying to kill Homer and all that. And of course, the famous scene which Homer was bathing. My baloney has a first name, it's Homer. My baloney has a second name, it's Homer. And then Krusty goes after Homer with a harpoon, and then Patty says, "There goes the last lingering thread of my heterosexuality. If only we knew." And they finally got rid of the crusty doll by sending it to eat to good instead of evil. Season four, the four Trails of Horror 4, October '93 had the Devil and Homer Simpson, Terror at 5.5 feet, and Bart Simpson's Dracula. I think the Devil and Homer Simpson was a pretty good episode because it portrayed Ned as the devil and Homer selling his soul for a donut. He goes to hell. He gets the people in hell angry as he eats all the donuts in the world and he's not stuffed. They have a trial and all that in March because she pledged her soul to Homer on their wedding night. Gets Homer's soul back. Trails of Horror 5 in '94 saw The Shining, Time and Punishment at Nightmare Cafeteria. And just like normal, the first segment was the best. The Shining is, The Shining. No, it's The Shining. You don't want us to get sued. In which Homer and family go to Burns' family cabin, and then Burns cuts off the TV and beer supply, and Homer goes bonkers, and then thankfully gets his TV back somehow. Transformer 6, October '95, saw Attack of the 50-Foot Eyesores, Nightmare on Evergreen Terrace, and Homer Cubed. I think that Nightmare on Evergreen Terrace beats Homer Cubed for me, anyway. And that's when Willie appears in all the kids' nightmares because he got killed off thanks to Homer's stupidity, stupid smarch weather. And then, there's a final showdown and Willie finally gets beaten. Number 7 happened in '96, The Thing and I at the Genesis Tub in Citizen Kane. It was too close to call, but I think The Thing and I, the first segment was the best one. Bart, Lisa, and Maggie find there's noises coming from the attic. Something escaped, and we learned that Bart had an evil conjoined twin named Hugo, and they had to split them up, literally. And then Hugo comes for Bart and wants to be sewn back together. And then they find out that Bart was the evil left twin the whole time. Episode 8 was in '97. The Omega Man, Fly vs. Fly, and Easy Bake Coven. I think the Omega Man won out for me. Anyway, of course, everything's subjective. But yeah, the Omega Man to me won because, it pictured Homer as being the last person on Earth and then him doing stuff, including singing War at the church, being completely naked. Of course, we don't see his doodle. And that there's zombies and that Marge and the family are safe because of the Simpson family house being poisonous. Episode 9 was '98, How to Pay, The Terror of Tiny Town, and Starship Poopers. They were all okay. I would go with Starship Poopers because it had Kane and Cordell's actually realizing they could be Maggie's real father because Maggie grows tentacles and all that. And Jerry Springer even does a thing. Number 10 happened in 1999 on Halloween. I Know What You Diddly Italy Did, Desperately Seeking Cena, and Life's a Glitch, Then You Die. I think the third one, Life's a Glitch, was my favorite because it parodied what could have happened in 2000 with the Y2K thing, which thankfully was just nothing more than mass hysteria. And that Homer kind of ruins things with Y2K, and then Lisa is allowed to go on a space rocket to Mars and chooses Marge, which means that Bart and Homer are stuck on Earth. Then they find a rocket, but it's filled with celebrities like Tanya Harding, Al Sharpton, and Tom Arnold. You know where that's going. Number 11 happened in 2000 with Ghost Dad. Scary Tales Can Come True and Night of the Dolphin. I think Ghost Dad for me was my favorite because Homer has bad things happen to him, but he doesn't die until he chokes on broccoli. St. Peter up in heaven tells Homer he must do one worldly deed, and Homer tries to do it but fails and saves a baby from being squashed by traffic. But St. Peter was not watching. I think that was set on purpose. Number 12 happened in November 2001. Of course, that's when they decided to do it after the World Series. Yeah, Fox has had the World Series since 2000, so they basically put it in November. In 2001, you had Hacks in the City Hacks, House of Wax, and Whiz Kids. Um, I think Whiz Kids was the better of the three for me. You know, pairing Harry Potter and all that. Of course, before like the books came out. 2002, number 13 came out. Send in the clones, the fright to creep and scare harms in the island of Dr. Hibbert. I think Send in the clones was a pretty good episode in which Homer tries to get out of chores and all that and finds a magic hammock and then makes clones of himself to get to do all the chores and all that. But unfortunately, they overpopulate and ruin things. Number 14, happening in 2003, was Reaper Madness, Frankenstein, and Stop the World. I Want to Goof Off. Um, Stop the World was my favorite episode. This was when Bart and Milhouse order some kind of stopwatch and find ways to goof off, and then they're found out. But then they freeze time and break the watch, meaning that everyone's suspended animation except for Bart and Milhouse, who are holding the watch. Bart and Milhouse think they can solve the problem with 8 1-hour sessions in stopwatch repair, but it takes them 15 freaking years, which is the stupidest thing possible. It shows how stupid they are. Episode 15 was The Net Zone, 4 Beheadings at a Funeral, and In the Belly of the Boss from 2004. I believe The Net Zone was number one. Yeah, that was the one in which Ned can predict people's fates and him shooting Homer and tries to prevent Homer from going to work. But Homer goes to work because it's Lenny's birthday and there's ice cream cake. Homer then has a button close by that could blow up the whole town, and then Ned shoots Homer to try to prevent it, but Homer somehow uses his tongue to push the button, and Marge berates him, saying that Homer only did it to prevent the garage from being cleaned, and says, "Joke's on you, the garage made it to heaven." Number 16 was BI, Artificial Intelligence, Survivor of the Fattest, and I've grown a costume on your face. BI, I think, was the best one because Bart is concussed after a fall from a balcony, and they get a robot kid named David who's better than Homer and Bart. Homer then throws Bart into the wilderness, and then Bart manages to scrape together robot parts and slashes both David and Homer in half. I think that was on purpose for Homer. Number 17 is when we had Married to the Blob, You Gotta Know How to Golem, and The Day the Earth Looks Stupid. Um, I think The Day the Earth Looks Stupid was actually the best one because it parodied War of the Worlds and all that, and basically how nobody took the narrator seriously after being tricked the first time, and then the second time they get bombed, and then Ken Cordos makes some kind of um, Middle Eastern war reference. Episode 18 was E.T. Go Home, Mr. and Mrs. Simpson, and Heck House. I think Heck House was the one in which Ned does some kind of spooky thing trying to scare kids into going to Christianity and basically says, if you watch Fox, you're going to hell. 19 was robot parody, Hella Get Ahead and Dead Advertising, and it's the Grand Pumpkin Millhouse. I think the Grand Pumpkin Millhouse, the one in 2008, was my favorite episode because it was Charlie Brown, it was Millhouse being blasted by Lisa and all that. It was kind of cute. 2009 saw Dial M for Murder or Press pound to return to the main menu. Don't have a cow, Mankind, and there's no business like Mo Business. This was kind of close to the time I stopped watching Trios of Horror, if you will. I say no, there's no business like Mo Business is when Mo does a musical trying to, like, he kills Marge and kills Homer to get with Marge. Yeah, and practically after Trios of Horror 20 in 2009, I stopped watching Simpsons episodes. There were some decent ones, but that just doesn't work out. So that's all I've got for this episode. I did pretty good with my reviews. So anyway, we are going back next week. We're going to go into an episode that finishes off Pride Month. Yeah, I found out I forgot to do the Simpsons Pride episode in Pride Month, but next Saturday we will do that. That will be the episode, Homer's Phobia, in which it actually won an award, and the Gay and Lesbian Alliance liked it. So it can't all be that bad. Anyway, thanks for watching. I'm Jeff Diamond. Adieu.